In today's video, I'll be showing you how to work the shell stitch, which is essentially just worked up by a 2-row repeat, but I'll go ahead and show you how to do every single row so that you can get a swatch that looks like this. For today's video, I'll be using a 5.5 millimeter crochet hook and just some extra cotton yarn that I have left over from a previous project. I'll link down what yarn it is and what shade it's in down below once I look at the label. But you can work this in any size yarn with any size hook. So without further ado, let's get started. Alright, so to begin, I have worked one row of foundation single crochets here. And if you're not familiar with the foundation single crochet, I have a whole other video tutorial going on in depth on how to work this stitch, which I'll link down below in the description box. So essentially for this shell stitch, you want to work in multiples of 6 plus 1. So for my swatch right now, I worked a total of 19 foundation single crochets, so that my swatch will be 3 shells wide. So I got 18 if I do 3 times 6, and then I add 1 extra foundation single crochet. So that is my row 1. Now for row 2, I'm going to chain 1 and turn my work. Now into this first stitch of the row, I'm just going to work 1 regular single crochet. And now I'm going to skip 2 stitches. I'm going to skip the next 2 stitches, and in this third stitch, I'm actually going to work 5 double crochets. So here I'm forming my first shell. And just make sure to work them all into that same stitch. Make sure you work 5. All right, and now we're going to go ahead and skip 2 stitches again. And in the third stitch, I'll work another single crochet to kind of anchor my shell down. So if I take a look here, I can see this is my first single crochet. I skipped 2 stitches. Into this third single crochet, I worked 5 double crochets. Then I skipped 2 stitches and I worked a single crochet. And that gives me my first shell. So I'm going to repeat this process. I've already worked the single crochet. Now I'm going to skip 2 stitches, and then in the next stitch, this third stitch, I'm going to work 5 double crochets to form my second shell. And once I finish up those 5 double crochets, I'm going to go ahead and skip 2 stitches again, and in this third stitch work a single crochet. So I'm going to repeat that all the way until the end of my row, and if I've done this correctly, I should end with a single crochet in the last stitch of my row. So I've just finished working my last shell. Now I'm ready to skip 2 stitches, and in the last stitch of my row, I will work 1 single crochet. So if I go ahead and take a look at my swatch right now, I have my 3 shells, and I have a single crochet at the edge of each shell right here. Now for row 3, I'm going to start this a little bit differently than I did this last row that I just worked. I'm going to actually start it by working a half shell into this single crochet here, which means I'll be working 3 double crochets. So I like to start my rows that begin with a double crochet by working a starting chainless double crochet, but alternatively you can also chain 2, turn your work, and begin working your double crochets. But for me, I'm just going to turn my work, pull up my working loop, pinch it with my index finger, wrap my hook around my working loop. I'm going to insert it into that first stitch, yarn over, pull through, and now I can complete this like a double crochet by yarning over, pulling through 2, yarning over, pulling through 2. And I just prefer this method because it gives me a cleaner edge. But again, like I said before, you can chain 2, turn your work, and work 1 double crochet, and that's the same thing as what I've just done. I also have another video tutorial that goes a little bit more into depth in how to work this stitch, and I definitely go a little bit slower in that video, which I'll also link down in the description box below. So this is my first double crochet of 3 double crochets. So I need to work 2 more double crochets into this first stitch of my row. And this is my first half shell here. So I've just worked 1 half shell into the first stitch of my row. And now I'm ready to continue the pattern as I was doing before. So I'm going to skip 2 stitches. I'm going to skip over these 2 double crochets of my shell. And into the third stitch, the top double crochet, I'm going to work 1 single crochet. Now again, I'm going to skip 2 stitches here. I'm going to skip those 2 double crochets from our shell. And into this single crochet, this third stitch here, I'm going to work my shell. So I'm going to work 5 double crochets into that single crochet. And once I've done that, I'm just going to repeat my pattern, which is skip 2, single crochet in the next stitch, skip 2, work a shell in the next stitch. And so if you're working this correctly, you should always work a shell into a single crochet, and you should always work your single crochet into the middle double crochet of each shell. So I have 1 single crochet left to work here, and once I've reached the end of my row here, I'm going to skip 2 stitches, and in the last stitch of my row, I'm going to work a half shell, which means I need to work 3 double crochets into the last stitch of my row. And that is it for row 3. If we take a look here, essentially what we've done is work these shells in between the shells of the previous row. So if we count our shells, we have 1, 2 full shells here in the middle of our swatch, and then we have these 2 half shells at the edges of our swatch, which still gives us a total of 3 shells. So once you've worked row 3, you'll just repeat the previous 2 rows now, rows 2 and 3, until your swatch is as long as you'd like. So I'll go ahead and show you how to start row 4, but it's just a repetition of row 2. So I'm going to chain 1, turn my work into the first stitch of my row. I'm going to work a single crochet, then I'm going to skip 2 stitches. Into the next stitch, I'll work a shell. And remember, a shell is made up of 5 double crochets all worked into the same stitch. And then once I finish my shell, I'm going to skip 2 stitches and single crochet in the next stitch. So I'll just continue this pattern across my swatch, and I'll repeat it for several rows until my swatch is long enough to show you what a few rows of shell stitch worked up look like. Okay, so I have worked up a few more rows in shell stitch, just repeating rows 2 and 3 like I showed you, and this is what my stitch pattern is looking like so far. As you can see, what ends up happening is the shells kind of sit in between each other, they kind of interlock, which makes a very soft fabric, especially after you block it. But I think it has a really nice look because it ends up looking kind of dense, as in the shells fill the empty spaces from the previous rows. This is a really great stitch for garments, but also for accessories. In general, I really like using this stitch for a lot of different things. I think it's really beginner friendly because it only uses the single crochet and the double crochet. And the most challenging part, I'd say, is if you adapt the edges where you begin with the double crochets. If you do the chainless starting double crochet instead of just chaining 2 and working a double crochet, I think that's probably the trickiest part of this stitch, but you absolutely don't have to do it. I just like it because I think it gives me a cleaner edge on this side, but again, that's totally optional. Thank you so much for watching this video tutorial. I hope it helped you figure out how to work the shell stitch, and let me know if you have any questions down below. Thanks so much for watching.